Now, why is ancient African history so important? And why is it important to understand um, the earliest periods of history? The main reason is that these societies, and I'm talking specifically about the hunter-gatherer societies that we neglect and put into the field of anthropology, these are the most just societies. They are also the first, coming into being 144,000 years ago. I cover this in my book, The Integration Trap, Generation Gap, Caused by a Choice Between Two Cultures. So why the most ancient? The Kemites called it the happening before happening happened. The first time, or what the Kemites call septepi, the first occasion. Well, among the Twa, there were no poor, there were no slaves, there were no oppressed, there was no abuse of men by men of women or children. This was the freest society that humans had ever known. It came into being 144,000 years ago, and humans existed in that state, starting with African humanity, for 100,000 years. And as a historian, Gerhard Krauss says, hunter-gatherer societies were the original affluent societies, where all of a people's wants and needs were easily satisfied without a lot of work, without a lot of labor. People spent a lot of time in leisure. Now, of course, these Twa are, they call them pygmies, which is a term that they don't like because they are not stunted people when it comes to size. They're fully grown, they're small. Everything that starts off small, you know? So we can draw from Twa societies many things that will help us today. I know that I have. But more important, the most just models that we find coming out of subsequent African societies have their foundation arising from the Twa. Like what? The Kemites' deepest thought is in the notion of Ma'at, the notion of truth, harmony, justice, right order. That notion derives from Mansuri, which means the same thing, truth, uprightness, justness. Maasori. Notice Ma. And we'll find among the Bambara, Ma is the term for the ideal person. In Kemet, that ideal person is Jeruma, self-contained person, quiet person, humble person, who is the ideal human being. When someone compliments someone in Bambara society and says, he or she is Ma, that is like saying, this is a high order of human being. The Twa provide the foundation for that. So we need to go back to the beginnings because we can draw some of the most just models from the beginning. In fact, the Twa would have no trouble explaining what waves and particles are, because when they described God, they said God was the infinite force, a part of which God distributes to everything that God creates. In other words, God's not a material being. God's force. God is energy. As I've said before, I've seen God. God is a beautiful light. And that light is within everyone. And that is the essence of what it is to be human, is to be in communion with that part of God that is within each of us. And that's where real wisdom comes from. The Bambara described wisdom as a light that exists within man or woman. So if we're to look at ancient African history, that is a part that we need to draw from now. And by the way, when you look at Black Lives Matter and they're drawing on Ella Baker's model of group-centered leadership, that model goes all the way back to the Twa, because it's a model where there are really no singular leaders, as they call it in Black Lives Matter, leaderful. In Twa hunter-gatherer societies, everyone had a say-so. And in fact, if you want to understand how to create societies where people are really empowered, then you have to understand the Twa gave birth to democracy, but not majority vote, consensus-based. And if Africa followed that today, then the foreigners, whatever they are, Chinese or European, could not come in and grab our resources, whether they're paying for it or getting it through stick-up agreements like structural adjustment. They couldn't do it because the people wouldn't allow it. They're not going to give away their wealth. So when we're talking about drawing from our past to create just models, no better place to start than in your ancient past. You're not going to stay there, but that is a key part of it. Now, the essence of Ma'at is truth. And when we're talking about what does it mean to be human, the essence of that is kindness. John Henry Clark used to have a basic definition of civilization. He said, it's being civil. And where did John get that from? Georgia, you know what I mean? His family was poorer than 10 church mice, but they were rich in culture, rich in ethics. And John carried that kindness with him. So Ma'at is speak truth, do truth. In other words, living the truth, living kindness, living care for each other. So African cultures, African American, African Caribbean, African, wherever we are in the world, are ethically based. We may not all be ethical. We have come under some stormy weather. And so a lot of us have, faced a lot of problems, and some of us have gone into a deep well far away from truth and justice. But as a general rule, our people still adhere to that. So the topic is African or Black humanism, models for just societies.